And one of the most common questions I get, asked by acquaintances, professional chefs, and amateur cooks alike. I often get it in messages and here on my YouTube channel. Which knife is the best? Let me tell you right away, there is no single answer to that question. The first question is what you will be using the knife for, and the other thing is the knife should be suited to your hand and your build. So you will choose the knife that is best for you. But let's go over what matters about each individual knife. This is the so-called chef's knife. This is the knife most commonly used in the kitchen. Of course, this type of knife comes in various sizes. This one is roughly a bit bigger than that one. Everyone chooses according to their build. This knife is, so to speak, a little smaller. I would recommend this for someone who is a bit smaller, who has a slightly smaller hand. But I wanted to show you, this is the most common knife in the kitchen. It is essentially used for chopping vegetables, and for cutting meat, and for mincing, fine chopping. It is rarely used for peeling vegetables because it is large. But this is the knife that will be used most in the kitchen during work. I've already shown it, this is that type of knife. Of course, it's a bit bigger. This is the knife I use most often. It fits my build and my hand. And I do most of my work with this knife. This is another knife that's often used in the kitchen. This is the so-called bread or pastry knife. Its characteristic is that it has these serrations. And what's good about those serrations is that it can slice through a crusty bread crust, a crispy crust of a croissant, some cake. We also often use it in the kitchen when we need to carve a roast. Why? Because roasted meat often has a crispy crust. And if we were to use a regular knife, no matter how sharp it is, it struggles to cut through the crust, and that's why these little blades really stand out, and they easily penetrate the crispy crust, whether it's a roast suckling pig, or a rolled veal, or something similar. So, this is a knife that's also very common in everyday kitchen use, vegetable peeling knife. Small, classic knife, these are the most common cheaper knife variants, but it's truly essential for work in the kitchen. So, for all precise tasks, peeling vegetables, peeling fruit, we always use this knife. It's very common and found in every kitchen. These three knives are ones I would recommend every cook have. That's what you'll use most when working in the kitchen. And let me tell you right away, certainly, if you're a beginner. I also really wanted to buy a knife case, a set of knives. The first reason you shouldn't do that is that those sets are very expensive. The second reason you shouldn't buy the complete knife set is that from those kits of 8 to 12 knives, you'll still end up using only these three knives the most. My recommendation is to buy a quality knife that you'll be able to handle well. Meaning a knife that fits your hand. You should have one vegetable/utility knife, and of course one knife for slicing bread. This is your classic. You use this knife the most, it handles about 90% of your kitchen work. And the other 10% you do with these two knives. If you want to work in the kitchen, if you've focused on everyday tasks, this is what you need. This knife is used for separating meat from bones. The so-called butcher's knife, some people call it a boning knife. Meaning the knife you use when you need to separate meat from bones. Its defining feature is a short blade. And it is not flexible. So you can easily work between the bones. And separate the meat from the bones. Besides the three knives that are essential for every kitchen. If you often work with meat processing, then of course you adapt to your needs, and then buy any additional knives you need to use more often. So this is a knife used in butchery to separate meat from bones. This knife is used for filleting fish. Its characteristic is a longer and thinner blade, which is flexible. Why is it flexible? Because when we separate the backbone, the bones from the fish meat, so it can bend and gently hug it, so we can go and separate the meat from the bones, so that as little fish meat as possible remains on the bones. So this is the knife you should take, if you often work with fish. A cleaver or meat axe. If you're a butcher, if you often work with larger pieces of meat, the recommendation, of course, is to also have a cleaver. A characteristic of any quality cleaver is that it is very heavy. Why? So you use as little of your arm strength as possible. Instead, you use the cleaver's own weight to more easily penetrate through bones. Of course, it should be made of quality metal, so it can be sharpened well, and cut through bones as cleanly as possible. Let me also show you a type of special knives, the so-called Thai knives. These knives are used for carving, that is, the so-called carving of fruit and vegetables, carving fruit and vegetables. A feature of these knives is that their blades are extremely thin and flexible. so you can very easily penetrate the food item, and cut and separate thin layers of vegetables or fruit. Of course, these are now variations on the basic types they have. This part of the knife is used for scoring on the food. If you don't have much carving experience, then you can first press with this part like this, and carve, draw, on the surface of the food. And then, of course, use the blade to work on the body, main part, where you traced it and separate the ingredient. And whether you're making some kind of floral arrangement, or something else you imagined earlier, this belongs to the so-called type of specialty knives, and is used for carving fruit and vegetables. And now let's talk a bit about how a knife should be held. There are a few variations. I think everyone should adapt the knife to their needs, how they will hold it, what will be easier for them. I tell everyone, especially when I work with students, that you must not hold the knife like this. Why? Because after a certain time of chopping, your hand will hurt. That means this isn't a natural position, and unfortunately I often notice someone holding a knife like this. Here, try holding it like this a few times when you work. You'll feel this side of your hand start to hurt. The recommendation is to hold the knife so that with your thumb, you grip the knife's so-called spine, because that's where you need the strongest pressure, and then your hand will simply work better. Or if the knife is larger, you can wrap your thumb around, and with your index finger hold this part of the blade, that is, the rear part of the blade, and then hold and maneuver the knife like that. This is more natural, you have strength, you can press the knife straight down and hard. When working with a knife, it's always the tip of the knife that does the work, when you're doing those precise chopping motions, or this middle part when you need power. So that's why you need to hold the knife like this, or like this. As for the hand that holds the vegetable, when you place your hand like this you need to turn it as if you're going to scratch someone. I always tell my students when I talk to them, don't pet someone and hold the vegetable like that, because you'll end up cutting off your fingertips, so don't hold the food like this, because you'll cut your fingers. Instead imagine you're going to scratch someone, and then what happens? You tuck these fingertips where your nails are under. Then the knife blade slides down along your fingers. That way you protect these tips. So this is how it will be, with your fingertips protected. The thumb is never in front, it should always be behind. And it holds the ingredient you're working with. Of course, depending on the size of the ingredient, your hands will be a bit more or less closed. It all depends on which ingredient you're holding. And of course this shouldn't be tense now. So your hand shouldn't be stiff like this, but a relaxed hand. Then you hold the knife and chop. Something that is also very important when you work. We stand a lot in the kitchen. When you chop or stand, your feet should be about shoulder width apart and your posture upright. Evenly balanced on both feet, and then work. Most often chefs lean on one leg, then the other leg while chopping, and because when we work in the kitchen, we chop large quantities of ingredients. We can stand like this for hours at a time. If you work like this or like that, after a while you'll have problems with your legs and your spine. That's why right from the start you should learn the correct way, and how to work. What else should you know when cutting? When you chop, don't use force by just pressing down. Because then you need extra strength, and you end up crushing the ingredient. When cutting correctly, you either pull toward yourself or push away from yourself, depending on which chopping technique you use. What you often hear in the kitchen is this chopping sound. That's usually when you slightly pull the knife toward yourself. You can see then now, it depends on the speed of your chopping and your practice. Or we practice what's called, some call it waves. Like waves moving. But I usually call it circular motions. Because when you see it, you pull, lift, and lower, pull, lift, lower, push, and that will be the process you'll use when you cut very gently but a larger amount of vegetables. And then once you learn this motion, it goes completely naturally. So, once more so you can see better, pay attention to my hand, and to the knife as it rises, lowers, pushes. So this is the motion. We lift, lower, push, lift, lower, push. Like when you look at a locomotive, that wheel as it turns, those two wheels that are connected. And then, there it is, this motion. So, when you practice this movement, you'll be able to cut all ingredients very easily that you'll be using. So, we hold the knife either like this or like this. See? And we don't hold the ingredient like this, so we won't cut off our fingertips. Instead, we gently tuck them under, as if we're going to scratch someone, and then the blade rests against this part of the fingers, with our nails tucked back. And that's how we hold the ingredient. Of course, we always make sure our thumb is set back, so we don't accidentally come like this and nick our fingers. And then you chop. Or like this, away from you or toward you. Or this circular movement. Thanks for your attention.